Greetings, everyone. Welcome, Jean Gordon. Jean has had an extensive career in engineering and technology, from building and repairing gas turbines to architecting and deploying enterprise scale IT infrastructures. Jean has spent over 25 years on the front line of technology. Currently, he serves as the Chief Technology Officer and founding partner of Transcend Wellness Products and Services, a retail wellness organization that's focused on the public health and wellness of local communities by using cannabis as a therapeutic tool for a wide variety of ailments. Please join me in welcoming Jean to Rise and Reinvent.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for your time today. This is going to be an amazing discussion. I love your bio, and I think we have a lot to talk about in terms of reinvention.
Yeah.
Let's start by having you describe yourself. So, not your job, but you as a person in a couple of minutes.
Sure. So this is always an interesting question when I get asked, but I guess my primary identity is I'm the son of Haitian immigrants who immigrated to the United States in the kind of early to mid 60s and and to New York. And I was born and raised with my older sister, Sabrina, who's an accomplished filmmaker, actually, Sabrina Gordon. Um, and yeah, we were born in Brooklyn, New York, in a rapidly changing neighborhood in the early 70s, primarily, kind of Irish, Italian, Jewish neighborhood, who that transformed it in the 70s and the 80s to a primarily Caribbean, Black American and Caribbean neighborhoods. So that's kind of my where I grew up. I went to high school in New York. I was a student athlete uh, in New York and did some of that, student athlete stuff in college. Um, but my parents, led a typical immigrant household. Um, they divorced in the early 80s when I was pretty young. So I was primarily in a single mother household. Um, and but always had a strong relationship with my dad, who was an engineer, which I think influenced my career path or career choice. I've always liked to understand how things worked, so I went to college for engineering, upstate New York at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and that's also where I kind of had my political and social kind of awakening. And, I had some of that at home, some of that in high school, but really, I was really exposed to a lot more kind of Black history, activism, Pan-Africanism. I was part of an organization that brought Kwame Ture to campus many times, who's formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. So I actually had a relationship with him, which was looking back pretty amazing. I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but yeah. So that really influenced my kind of political ideology. And then I went to work for corporate America for 25 years. So you never know where life is going to take you. Um, but in corporate America is where I really, you know, got my professional acumen, right? As an engineer, and then eventually as a manager and leader, and then as an executive. Um, but I've always had an entrepreneurial kind of, spirit. Uh, you know, throughout the years, tried ventures here and there, but today, like you said in the intro, I'm the co-founder and technology officer of Transcend Wellness. And we've been in business for about 6 months now, and we're very, very excited to grow and expand the business.
Excellent. So, you've had a diverse set of experiences is how I'll describe it. Uh, so tell me about your confidence and managing uncertainty during those transitions.
Great question. So you only have confidence when you're managing through a transition, right? Um, you have to bet on yourself. And for me and my upbringing, being in from an immigrant family, immigrant families are very, very conservative, right? Always want to color within the lines. You're here to take advantage of a great opportunity in America. You know, don't screw it up. Just, follow the safe conservative path, right? And um I'm sure I caused my mother great distress every time I changed the job. um, but the one thing that I really appreciate is having confidence in myself and in my abilities, right? So that I always felt sure that I could figure something out. Whether I actually could or not really didn't matter at the time, right? But I always had that confidence, which at the end of the day, confidence suppresses fear, right? And fear is what prevents you from doing things, right? And that's what I try to teach my children every day is that, every decision I made out of fear ended up being a poor decision, right? So confidence is the elixir, I would call it, to fear.
Yes, absolutely. How did you build that confidence in yourself at a young age?
Really, it was through doing things, right? I when I was, growing up, you know, um, in the late 70s and through the 80s in New York, it wasn't, you know, um, as they like to call it, the safest, biggest city in the world at the time. So there were a lot of elements in that, and adversity all around me, right? So my household protected me a lot from that, shielded me a lot from that. But as a young boy, I was trying to be out in the streets, right? Right. So I was running around all over the place with my friends. And, you face situations that, force you to confront your fear, right? And once you get through some of those, kind of those, and these are really young, early childhood kind of life forming experiences. Once you are able to get through to the other side of that, you know, you feel like you can do anything, right? And I've always been someone who like to look at things and try to understand, how they worked, and that's why I became an engineer. And you know, I would fix things around the house, right? That gains confidence, right? I had no business doing any of these things, wiring, lights and stuff like that. But I was able to figure it out and succeed at it, right? So those early challenges of of facing something that you're unsure of, but just driving through it and then getting to the other side. And the result even as long as it's not disastrous, right? It doesn't even matter, right? I didn't have to do a great job, but I felt really good and confident about um, getting through a challenge and learning from it, right? And that over years and years and years really enables you to, just go for it.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's a lot of people say that, taking a risk is all about the learning. It's not about the success of what you do. And each time you try and you take a chance on yourself, you definitely learn, which helps, it sounds like in your case, to build that confidence. Wonderful. Um, On the same lines, like what role did failure play in shaping the person that you are today?
You know, failure, like I know what, that's said a lot. Like, you learn to fail, you learn to fail, and that's absolutely true. At the time, I almost ignored failure. Right? Like, I didn't even consider when I was doing something failure as an outcome. Even if I didn't get to where I wanted to get or accomplish what I wanted, I never really looked at it as a failure, right? I
Hmm.
looked at it really as, yeah, not at the time, right? But looking back, it was learning. Like, oh, I figured out how to do this by trying that, right? Now, I didn't get that, right? But I did learn this. So I never internalized those things as, oh, I'm learning through failing or anything like that, right? It was never letting, I guess, failure, right? But never letting coming up short on a goal um, define that activity, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, you will always learn something, right? No matter what you do, right? If your mind is open to it, right? And whether you get to that finish line or whether you achieve that goal, um, I can't. I never really looked at that as failure. I looked at that as, hey, I learned something new that I can try something else with now. So
Okay.
yeah.
Excellent. Some people say failure is tuition. It's the learning that you
Yeah,
get.
it's
Yes.
the learning.
So
It's the
embrace
really the
both.
learning I like to focus on, when I go through these things.
Yes. Okay. Uh, I'd love to hear more about um, what is as you think about your career and your journey, what is the most unexpected lesson uh, in your career journey?
Unexpected lesson. Like we were talking about, I've always felt confident, you know, in my ability. I'm competitive, right? So when I'm in an environment, um, I always feel like I am the best in the room. Um, and I guess in corporate America, will kind of throw cold water on your face a bit, right? And I did not really expect it to that level. Um, and I'll explain it a bit. Like, you can actually be the best of it, right? And have a lot to contribute. And in my opinion, or in your opinion, right? Others are not, right? And are not really contributing much value at all, right? Um, and to kind of be overlooked or not to have other voices elevated that, in your opinion, really aren't valuable, right? In terms of whatever scenario we're in, and um, that was took me a while to adjust in corporate America. Um, it actually drove a lot of um, uh, kind of pivots in my career because I always said I always had a hard time working in an environment that I can't really, respect my superiors, right?
Hmm.
To put it bluntly, right? And the only times I really stuck in something when I had a superior, I don't even call him a mentor, right? That I respected and we could have, you know, productive interactions, right? So, you know, and I may have lost track of the original question, but that was an unexpected challenge for me that I had to learn through, right? And be able to come. out in a more positive place than going in, right? And I've also learned as I mature that everyone has different backgrounds, everyone has different experiences, and everyone has something different to add, right? And I think going through that whole process got me to where I am now, where I can really see and try to extract um, what people do best as part of a team, right? And I feel like I'm very good at building effective teams, and that's a key point there, to meet people where they are and let them shine in their own way.
So those are, you'd say, the top lessons you learned from that experience in corporate America.
I think so. Yeah, 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 yeah. The ability to really create a highly effective team. And I know that's a buzzword now, but it's very true. Um, it takes empathy, it takes skill, and I think it takes experience, right? To be able to do that.
Okay. If you could give advice to your past self at the start of a major transition, what would that advice be?
Um, the probably the best advice I would give my younger self, other than like stock tips. Right. Um, um, no, but all jokes aside, is really try to be as consistent with action towards a tactical goal, not necessarily strategic goal, but a tactical goal, right? A shorter term, is be very consistent um, when you're trying to achieve that goal, right? That was an issue for me when I was younger, is um, when trying to achieve a goal, most of the time I didn't achieve a goal is because I didn't stick with a consistent action to get there. And strategic goals are always achieved through smaller tactical goals, right?
Mm.
So I would tell myself, just focus on that. Your strategic mind will take you where you want to go, right? But you'll never get there if you can't consistently achieve smaller tactical goals through consistent action. So I would, that's the main lesson. I would give my younger self there.
Yeah, sometimes when you're a serial entrepreneur or a person with a strong growth mindset, you're always thinking about what's next. And honestly, I don't think that is majority of people in, mid-level positions in corporate America. You're thinking about the promotion, but not necessarily you personally. Where do I want to be from a skills perspective and relationship and joy and happiness? And so, being able to tell your younger self to embrace, like, be in the now, um, while still having that growth mindset can be a challenge.
That you hit it right on the head. That's exactly what my issue was, and
Mm.
still plagues me at times, right? You're thinking, you know, way down the line, or what you want to do, what you want to be, without, hey, build yourself up now, right? Just a quick anecdote. I worked for General Electric during the Jack Welch era. And I don't know how much your audience know Jack Welch, but he's like considered like the gold standard for, corporate executives, right? And there were there are three things really, but I'll talk about two that he really, really, really impressed me with. Was, you hear it a lot now, but he said, "You're the CEO of you,"
Mm.
right? And this is a guy who, managed 100,000 people, had employees, right? But he wasn't afraid for his employees in this gigantic organization to be kind of self-realizing. That's how I took it. Some people took it differently, right? Like, oh, you don't really care about me. But I took it like, as empowerment, really, right? You're the CEO, you own your career, you own what you want to do, right? Don't come to me asking for stuff. Was really the message, right?
Right.
And he was right in my view, right? Uh, so like kind of you're the CEO of you. Um, and related to that was, whenever you're doing something in a job, right? Think like an owner, right? And as a business owner now, you know, I can say that's the best employee, right? The person who thinks like an owner, right? Thinks about the business, not about your job, but this is not my job. Like the worst phrase in I think for anyone to say, that's not in my job description, right? Like that's like I cringe when I hear that, right? You know, think like, this was your business, right? Now the counter to that is like, well, pay me like it's my business too, right? But that's another, that's another story. But that I think is a good foundation for a employee-employer relationship, right? And if you carry yourself that way, you'll be respected that way, right? If you act like, a worker bee, right? You'll be treated like a worker bee, right? If you act and think like an owner, right? You will have different types of conversations with your manager. And if your manager thinks like a worker bee, speak to his manager or her manager, right? You will hit somebody who you can connect with, right? So
Wonderful. I agree wholeheartedly. As you think about your journey, um, have you found your purpose? And if so, what is it?
wow, that's a tough one. You know, being a father kind of redefines that, right? I have two boys, young men now, 13 and 15 years old. We still live in New York. So they're growing up in the city here. And you know, anyone can have children, right? That's not necessarily an accomplishment, right? But I feel, and this is obviously very biased, but I'm very impressed with the young men that they're becoming. And that makes you reflect on, at the end of the day, what are you leaving behind, right? What is your legacy, right? And I never really thought in those terms before. And I think that is, fast becoming my purpose. Meaning leaving a legacy that not just, I don't want to give my kids a life, that I didn't have, or, all these things, right? Um, I want to be able to leave a foundation where they can become kind of masters of their own destiny, right? And not, have it's really freedom, right? Not have decisions made for you, right? When I was growing up, a lot of times, you know, look, I would have loved to been, like an activist and out there and, and making change to society. And I still feel deeply for that. But, I had to make sacrifices. My parents made sacrifices for me. And I couldn't go out there and not take advantage of the opportunities that they disrupted their lives for to try to afford for me, right? So almost those choices were almost kind of made for me, right? Um, you know, Kind of my purpose now is to give my children the tools, and I speak to my children. I'm even speaking to other children in my community, my friends' children, uh, um, lay down a legacy, a foundation that is rich with opportunity, right? For them to be able to, um, you know, put their stamp on the world, right? And
Mhm.
and and execute what they're good at, right? And whether that looks like, a company that we leave to them, or a business or whatever form that takes, right? That's kind of what more and more is becoming my ultimate kind of purpose is to um, leave some infrastructure, some institution for the next crowd to pick up the baton and run with.
Yes, so generational
Generational,
legacy. Yes,
generation.
absolutely. Leaving
Yeah,
it for not only your kids, but that entire demographic, right,
yeah,
of people, uh, and creating a legacy.
yeah.
Excuse me.
I
Uh,
say I tell my kids, you guys don't have to visit me at the cemetery or anything. Just have a picture of me, put one of those, one of those portraits they have in those old
uh-huh.
houses. Just put one of those up for me.
Okay. I'm sure they will. So you've navigated and zigged and zagged, gone different directions in your career. You're in a role that is, I would say, non-traditional right now.
Yes, yes, very non-traditional.
And so before we go, well, tell us a little about the business. And then my question is, how have you reinvented yourself while staying authentic to who you are?
I'll start with that first, and then we could talk
Okay.
about the business a little bit.
Okay.
That's a difficult question, right? Because I always feel authentic to myself. It's really what other people see you, right? Or who think they know you, right? Because you change, right? People I know from my childhood still see me as that person, right? People I meet at work see me as that person, right? So my children see me a certain way. So I have, like I mentioned, some political sensibilities. I feel that I've maintained over the years. Um, my identity, right? I still kind of think of myself as a bit of an immigrant, even though I was born and raised here in the States, right? Um, and it's really kind of your core values, right? That you develop, in your late childhood, early adulthood, right? That really, I think, in my mind, define kind of how you're going to move through life. And there's a psychologist that says, we always see ourselves as our 19-year-old selves, right? Right? Throughout your whole life, you could be 80 years old. You think of yourself as that. And I think that's kind of around the time where you really solidify who your authentic self is, right? um, things change over time, right? I've grown. I was a radical in college. I'm way more conservative now, right? I don't necessarily say I'm betraying my authentic self. That's I just got more information over time, right? And hope to pass some of that information over, like we were talking about, to the next generation. But yeah, I mean, I think you will know it when you are compromising your core values, right? We all make bad decisions, right? And when you reflect on those bad decisions, you know a lot of times it's because either you acted out of fear, right? Or you went against some core value for it, and you know it, right? So I try to um avoid both.
Yes. And so it sounds like also embracing change, being open to new ideas, new concepts,
Absolutely,
is what
absolutely.
helps you.
Yeah, you can't be rigid. You have to be willing to admit when you're wrong. You also have to be willing to tell people when they're wrong too, right? Which is a little more difficult, right?
Accountability. Yes.
Yeah. But without hostility, right? So that's another thing you kind of learn over time of, um, just how to interact. in a not an egocentric way, towards folks, right? And hopefully people see that, when you're talking to them.
Okay, so the company. Tell me,
Yes,
how that got
exactly.
started.
So, a good friend of mine from college. So backing up a little bit, New York State, a few years ago, legalized cannabis in the state, right? Or they decriminalized it, and then they legalized it over years, and um, and a few years ago, there was a legal framework that was put in place to legalize, the sale of cannabis, right? So first they decriminalize usage, and then they um, put a regulatory framework around the commercial aspects of it, right? Um, Personally, I've seen kind of firsthand a lot of the really, really horrible things that happened as a result of the war on drugs in the 80s. I grew up that was the era that I grew up in. The very, you know, painful impact that drugs have on the community, and then the double down of the law enforcement and culture of the country at the time that just demonized people, right? And that's that's kind of core to my growing up in at that time frame. So, I have very strong opinions about that time frame and how um, uh, these drugs are looked at in society, right? Um, and particularly cannabis, which you know, I have lots of um, um, friends and people who, you know, really just use it as, really, either a medicinal usage or even a spiritual usage, right? And you know, when this kind of movement started, right? I was very happy about it, right? But I had no plans on really doing anything with it until a friend of mine said, "Hey, these legal frameworks were around social justice and people who were impacted by the war on drugs and the disproportionate incarceration of Black and Brown people and everybody in my communities that were serving ridiculous, prison sentences, um, because of it." Um, he said, "Hey, we qualify, right? We were impacted, right? Like we are the people that they wrote this legislation for, right? Whether you were directly impacted or you had family impacted, or if you lived in a community that was impacted, right? That's how the legislation was written." So, he said, "Look, I'm applying for a license. I want you to join me in going in business, right? There's a massive opportunity here. For once, folks from my community are being given um, an opportunity here, right?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it." And that was about 3 years ago. Um, we started the application process. Our original intent was to open a retail store, and take it from there, right? And try and grow a business, right? So in an area that kind of has a personal attachment to myself and um, my partners. And so it grew from he actually put the team, pulled me in, pulled in a couple of other of his friends, and we started the company. And we started off with one license, and as things evolved, we ended up with five. And we are deploying, you know, those five retail locations, um, when we thought about how we were going to do this, right? There was a explosion, right, of like these smoke shops and all these things that can, and we didn't want to do that, right? And we said, look, if we're going to do this, it has to really our main goals is remove the stigmas that were always traditionally attached with these products, right? Number one, right? Number two was, you know, there's a tremendous opportunity to really explore the positive effects that these things can have, especially now with people with extreme levels of anxiety and just poor health in general. Um, the pressures of, society today is like things that, I thought I had it bad, in the 80s. It's the societal pressure is insane now, especially for some of our younger folks. So, not to go on too long, but we said we need to develop this as um, and really wellness was the right phrase, a wellness center that uses this as a tool, right? It's not the only tool that we use, right? But we wanted to develop these retail locations in our communities that could be centers where people can get educated, right? Primarily, um, uh, kind of so that they remove the fear and the stigma, like fear, get the fear out of there, and then actually provide solutions for folks, right? Whether it's actually through products, through referral to other types of wellness activities, meditation. I loved your moment of centering at the beginning of this. Um, Yoga, the whole gamut, right? Of of total kind of addressing your health and wellness, right? The medical industry is really focused on acute, you know, issues, right? And
Hmm.
we're trying to get ahead of that, right? A part of our team, we have two medical doctors, a nurse, right? So we're very well versed in what the current medical infrastructure provides, right? And it does a lot of things really well, right? So I don't want to sound like, say, oh, don't trust modern medicine or anything like that. Listen, everything has its place, right? But we're trying to get ahead of that with ailments that are not well addressed by traditional the medical infrastructure today, and particularly in our communities, right? We have traditionally not embraced mental health, right?
Yes, agree.
Um, and we self-medicate, right?
Hmm.
Well, let's be, kind of logical and prescriptive about, know what we're doing, right? And that's what we're trying to do with the business. And we're trying to grow. We're to our 5 stores in New York and grow throughout the Northeastern corridor over the next kind of 3 to 5 years. So
That's a great journey that you described. And it sounds like you used a lot of the experiences earlier in your life and career, the activism you spoke about, the leadership and I think, resilience and adaptability from corporate America and all of those things. And so, what would you say is a leadership lesson that you learned as you were building this company that was unexpected or impactful to your experience?
yeah, it may sound, like obvious, but it's never obvious when you're doing it. We started this business, we all knew each other, right? We were friends, very close friends, right? And when people say never do business with friends and things like that, but we're all very like-minded, but more than that, right? We're all very like-minded and we shared, uh, a vision. But I guess a challenge that I've had, I like you said, I've been in corporate America. I built lots of teams and lots of things like that. Most of the other folks on my team are from the medical industry, right? So they're doctors, right? So it's not quite the same, right? In terms of being business focused, right? These are healthcare professionals, right? So I guess figuring out how to deal with um, personality traits from people you know and you love for a long time that you've never seen before, right? So they're seeing sides of me that they've never seen, right? Because I'm kind of like in work mode and I'm doing my thing and they're doing the same, right? So it's an interesting dynamic over the last, year or so where, you're learning to deal with friends and family on a professional level, right?
Mhm.
And it's not something to run away from. I know a lot of people try to run away from that. So that was a little surprising that the way the challenges arose and the way we've been able to overcome them, right? Because we are overcoming them, right? And it's great. It's great. It's really been a wonderful experience. I love being with people that I love, right? And you can't beat it. If you can overcome some of these, I look at it now as trivial challenges, right? You overcome worse challenges in corporate America, in my view, right? So if you can do that, you can do this, right?
Right.
But nothing beats um, being in business with people you care about, and you all care about the same things.
Yes, and that's the thing is you're all marching toward the same goal. You all want the same thing, success for the company. But sometimes bringing in a third party to neutralize the conversation and facilitate, some of the challenges can also be helpful.
Oh, it's critical.
Yes.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
There are many times we have to bring in, and this is another that's great about my team, is that we're open to that. Some people aren't open to that, right?
Right.
Hey, let's admit that we don't know what we're doing here. Let's bring somebody else in,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that goes with the maturity, right? We're all mature professionals also, right? So everyone is open to that. But that's I agree. That's 100% critical to get outside eyes on you on a periodic. You have to actually make it a practice, right, on a periodic basis.
Yes. And have those retreats and, times where you can sort of just really focus in on the business, but also with a facilitator.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Another question I had as we wrap things up. What is your ultimate goal? What is your personal definition of success?
I think I may have touched on it a little bit, but it's the generational it's laying a foundation um for the next generations to come. Um my extended family, we make it a thing every other year. Family, extended family, friends. We have a massive trip that we all, it's a big thing, right? So, and we all go somewhere, Costa Rica, Mexico, wherever. We go away somewhere, right?
Hmm.
Intentionally, out of the city, out of our normal lives, on vacation. It's a vacation. It's a family vacation at the end of the day, but it's grown. I mean, we went in 20 last year, last summer, 2024. Um, it was like 90 people that were there, right? And it's folks of our generation, some of our parents go, all the kids go, and they all meet each other and they connect and everybody's a cousin, right? Right. And I say that is because that's one piece of um letting the next generations know they're not alone. They're
Hmm.
not doing this alone. They have a full support network, right? And 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 to add on to that, we want to take that to the professional level where, you know, we don't want you to have to go get a job. You can if you want to. If there's a skill set you want to learn that only does job, great, go do it. Right. But
Mhm.
we want to have an environment, we want to have an infrastructure that if you want to be an accountant, hey, we have a business here and we need accountants. Go
Yes.
intern here, right? You don't have to work for the family business, but why wouldn't you, right? But you know, so we would love to build me and my cousins and my business partners. We would love to be able to build that type of foundation that provides not just financial support for school and education and things like that, but to help grow you know, their visions, right? You can have a vision of something, right? But if you can't execute it, right? If you don't have the resources to execute, you don't have the know-how to execute it, right? It's a struggle, right? And we want to at least be that support, say, hey, if you want to be able to do something, we can help. We're a resource to you, right?
Yeah.
And building that is really, um, as I get older, is something I want to get into place before I retire and live on the beach or something.
As you think about your, immigrant family, there's probably a lot of things that you've experienced that have been first generation, right? First generation, maybe corporate, first generation college, now first generation entrepreneur in the United States. And so all of those lessons, it sounds like you want to share with, your family and the next generation to help them to avoid the pitfalls maybe, or to learn from your mistakes and your experiences. So,
Yeah. That definitely that. One thing I found about having children is that, they you can tell them not to do something to avoid a mistake, but they'll do it anyway. But yeah, but mostly to be a resource, right? One thing when I think about myself, what would have helped me, when I graduated college, I tried to start my own business with a friend of mine. And that didn't work out. But even then, I didn't see that as a failure. I really learned a lot through that experience. But one thing was that I didn't have access to resources, not just money, right? Like you said, my parents were immigrants, right? So they didn't know how to build a business in America or
mm,
anything like that, right? They're like, hey, go get a job, man. What are you doing, right? So um, to have that, perspective, even just a knowledge resource, right? Or contacts, right?
mhm.
Networking, right? There's a vast array of resources that could be a tremendous help to a young person trying to do something, right? And even in corporate America, right? If you want to build a corporate career, that's fine too. And we have plenty of experience doing that too, right? So
Yes.
you know, really being like more like an institution, right? For that 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 we all have access to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Jean, thank you so much for your time and your insights. You've had an incredible journey, and I wish you continued success along the way.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I wish you the same. I think Rise and Reinvent is a great platform. And yeah, I wish you guys all the success. I hope this thing blows up, beyond anything you could imagine.
Thank you. I hope so too. All right.
Great.
Take care.
Thanks, Nicole.